All right, we are live. We are live. Welcome, welcome to Wife After Prison, our monthly huddle where we get together and I am known for giving voice to the psychological impact of incarceration, known as post-incarceration syndrome. Post-incarceration syndrome is a set of mental disorders that occur in those who are currently incarcerated, those released, most severe, and those who have spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. I am so excited about tonight's live. I have some amazing guests and also my co-host Tosca and Mataka, who is with me every month. So before we get started, I want to ask you guys just to let us know where you are logging in from and to share. This is a conversation for everybody. I get asked all the time about the name Wife After Prison. And is it just for wives? No, it's not just for wives. It's for anybody who has a loved one or who has been affected by the system, whether you are, the wife, the mother, the girlfriend, the husband, the brother, whomever. So this is what we'll be talking about tonight is we're going to be talking about solitary confinement, and I do understand that prisons have different names for that. Administrative segregation is what I'm told that it's being called now, but we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the effects of it. Not only does it affect the person who is incarcerated, it also affects the family members. We have one guest who is popping in now. We have one guest who has just popped in. She'll be sharing her story of her husband and how solitary confinement affected their lives. So again, I want to ask you guys to share this information. Tag a friend, tag someone I know in the community where prison wives are. There's so many groups out there. So if you know someone who needs this conversation, please tag them in. Okay. Um, my guest tonight is Dr. Tammy McCotter. Dr. Tammy, I met her through LinkedIn. She's one of my LinkedIn connections. And what drew me to her is that every morning she gonna give you a song. She gonna dance for you, and she's gonna give you something motivational. And we connected together. And I'll give her an opportunity to share her story and what she brings to the table. Um, I uh, I asked her to be a part of this. Somebody have a hot mic. So if you can mute your mics, any of my guests have a hot mic. So if you can mute your mics, I appreciate that. Okay. Hi, Keena. I see you out there. I asked her, she is a former correctional sergeant, and I asked her to join us because I want the community to understand that I know a lot of times the correctional officers in the staff, they get a bad rap, but she was one that refused to turn a blind eye to all of the stuff that she was seeing, and she spoke out. So I asked her to join us. Valinda is another one of my connections from LinkedIn. She reached out to me and shared with me that her husband had did 27 years and he struggled. He told her that his 18 months in solitary confinement unraveled him to the point that eventually he OD'd. So we'll be talking to her. Um, let's see here. And I just want you guys to know the frequency of this live. We will go live every month, the third Tuesday of every month. We're going to go live with a topic. Next month topic where we're going to be talking about reentry in intimate relationships, where we're going to have couples who are going to be on here and they're going to be sharing. They're going to be sharing the struggles within the relationship. So you guys mark your calendars for that. And the purpose of these lives is to educate, educate. Again, when I needed this information, I did not have it. Kevin and I had no idea what was happening to him, and it vicariously attached itself to me. So the purpose of these lies is to educate, to equip, and to empower you guys. And that's why I say when you come to this table, bring you a pencil and a pen, because we're going to be dropping some nuggets. And if I were you, when I'm taking notes, I will be taking these notes and I will be sharing with my loved one who is currently incarcerated, right? Because again, we cannot depend on the system to educate them. We got to push it into them. We got to push that information into them. So without further ado, and let me say this last. The reason why I chose this topic tonight is because a lot of times our loved ones are in solitary confinement or whatever the name is, in that particular state. And we don't know the extent of it. We don't know the effects of it, but it does affect them, right? And we'll hear that from Valinda. I think she may be having some technical issues. But anyway, I remember a guy who had gotten out, and he had spent a lot of time in solitary confinement, and he was at a transitional home, and for days all he would do is sit on side of the bed. And uh, one guy asked him, say, man, you all you doing is sitting on side the bed, you don't never come out of the room or anything. And his reply was, I didn't know that I could. And he had spent a lot of times in solitary confinement. His mind was conditioned, he was institutionalized, that he didn't know he was free physically, but he was not free mentally. And so a lot of times, when your loved ones come home, I hear a lot of times, he isolates himself. He isolates himself and he doesn't talk. We have to, be open to really understand what the psychological impact of this all, right? So this is why we're going to be having this conversation. And I have to do a disclaimer. I know, prison have a different effect on a different person, right? So, because there's that not me, not my loved one, not me, not my loved one. So in the words of Lester Young, a guy that had did over 20 years, when I had him on, and I asked the question, do you think that you were affected by prison? And he said, can you stand in the rain and not get wet? Meaning no one goes to prison and not be affected by it. So without further ado, I am going to allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves and tell you about what they do. And then we're going to go over into our guests. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to check on Valinda. Okay. So Tosca, you want to take it away, and then Mataka, and then Dr. Tammy is going to come in and she's going to start sharing some information with us. Okay. Go ahead, Tosca.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tosca Tolson. I am a mental health professional here in mid Missouri. One of the primary groups that I hold is a batterer intervention group, which means most of the individuals I serve have been convicted of domestic violence or some kind of violent offense towards an intimate partner. I've been doing that work specifically about 9 years and been doing mental health work for about 2 decades, not to age myself. But thank you everyone for logging on.
Mataka.
Okay. How y'all doing? My name is Mataka Escari. I'm a certified peer specialist here in Columbia, Missouri. I work in reentry. We connect people to resources, give them job coaching skills, interview skills, personality profiles, generate Holland codes to help map careers out for them. But I also work with people who struggle with substance use and mental health. And a lot of the struggles that I see people encounter are the things that are not really addressed, most of them regarding post-incarceration syndrome, which is not nothing that I stumbled upon by happenstance. I was going through some adjustments when I came home after doing 23 and a half years, and I didn't know what it was. And so really, Erica My child's mom really, she was part of the process of discovering Miss Bruno and wife after prison. And at first I was like, mental health, you got me mixed up. I'm from the north side of St. Louis, please. I'm hard. You got me mixed up. But in reality, you know, like in our community, mental health is seen as a taboo topic because it's perceived as a weakness or a synonym for crazy. So it took some time for me to come to the conclusion that I was struggling with some stuff. But when I did, I was able to develop some healthy coping skills to be able to adjust. And I'm still in transition after 3.5 years, but I'm doing much, 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 much better.
Good. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Tammy, you want to tell us a little about you and what you do?
My name is Tammy McCotter, and I've been in corrections now for almost 29 years. The bulk of my career is in North Carolina, where I left North Carolina as a correctional sergeant, acting lieutenant. I am currently working right now in Maryland, in Anne Arundel County, as a training coordinator in the detention/correctional field. I've been, like I said, I've been in this career. I absolutely love what I do. I also am a public speaker. I go out into the communities. I talk to battered women. I talk at the schools. I talk to anybody and everybody that will listen. Because what people don't understand is this one premise right here. In order to be healed, you said it a few minutes ago, Miss Bruno, you have to forgive. And once you forgive, you have to allow love to come in, whether it's forgiveness for yourself or forgiveness of others. And most people don't want to forgive, they want to blame. You have to be able to forgive in order to be healed, because forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. So that's the
All right.
bulk of what I do.
Thank you for sharing that. And Valinda, let's see, I'm going to unmute you. Okay. So, you want to tell us a little about you?
Hello, thank you. I'm honored to be here, definitely in the presence of all of you. I was first, I'm going to tell how I found out about Ms. Bruno, is my husband was looking for different post-incarceration programs that he wanted to get involved with. And he was telling me to check out this page here. And I started following Ms. Bruno as a result. He reached out to someone in New York that had a post-incarceration program that he wanted to get involved with. He spoke with them a couple of times, but nothing happened. And so he was seeking help to deal with being out, and he knew he was having issues. So that's how I found out about Miss Bruno. But he got out 8 years ago, and I sat in the PO's office with him, and he was saying he needs to see a psychotherapist or psychologist or something he was asking. And she said, we don't offer those services. There's nothing that we can do to help you with that. So he tried to find a therapist through my insurance. That was 8 years ago, and nothing ever happened. But he knew he needed it then, because thank God he did see a therapist while he was incarcerated. There was a therapist when he was serving his 17 years.
Wow.
He knew the benefit of it, but he needed more time and didn't get it.
Well, we're gonna dive into that. Again, I just want to say thank you guys. Thank you guys for your willingness to come on and share. Again, this conversation is so broad. You know, one time Kevin and I were talking, and we just thought okay, this is it, this is it. But every time I got a new message, a new DM, somebody crying out for help, we were like, man, I was like, this thing is like an onion. You can pull back one layer and you think you have it nipped, but there is so much to this understanding post-incarceration syndrome. But I am just grateful. I am just grateful that we're having this conversation. We're having this conversation because based on a post that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I was sharing about a gentleman who did 32 years, and he has been out less than 3 months, and he reoffended. And so this time, I'm sure he's not going to get out. And I shared that live, and it was shared over 900. Last time I checked the numbers, it was shared 963 times, and that was kind of over. but it showed me that based on the comments, it showed me that keep talking, Sheila. Just keep talking. Because there were so many people who were saying, what is post-incarceration syndrome? I don't know what this is. And I got a loved one who's out and he's doing that. So a lot of people don't understand, right? And again, this is what this platform is about. It's about educating you, empowering you, and equipping you with the necessary tools that you may be able to help your loved one, and not only just help them, because a lot of times, we think just because our loved ones have been incarcerated that they're the only ones that need to see the therapist. Like it was me. Like years ago, Sheila in therapy would not have been in the same sentence. It wouldn't have. But I'm grateful that, for that opportunity, and I love it. But anyway, so we're going to dive right in. And I'm going to start with Valinda. Again, her husband, she gave me permission a couple of weeks ago to share with you guys what he had written. And so for some years, he suffered in silence. And he finally admitted that he was fooling himself. So Valinda, can you share with us about your husband? I know he did 2 stints in prison. Can you just share about your husband, and when did you begin to see the struggles, and what did that look like?
Well, I didn't see the struggles, I can't say clearly, until this last time he came home 3 years ago, which was the tail end of all his time. When he was home the last time, he was seeking help through a psychologist or something himself. He wouldn't go to NA, he wouldn't go to meetings. He said they wouldn't work for him. So to me, it sounded like an excuse. But as this last time he went away, I started getting help for myself. Well, just through Ayanla Van Zant's program, I started just looking at some of her things and realizing, oh, wait a minute, my thinking is a little off about some things. So as I started trying to heal myself, so when he came home this time, I was in a better place, and the dynamic between us was different. So I wasn't feeding into the energy that was coming from him. So I started realizing, like, okay, he's dealing with a lot of things. And it became clear to me that the addiction was just a symptom of deeper underlying issues, because everybody thought the addiction was his issue. He needed to get help. He needed to get help. He needed to get help. But he had other issues. He did start seeing a therapist when he was in the halfway house. He had the state insurance. But after he got out, well, after COVID, the place shut down. He was never able to find that same therapist again. And he started seeing another therapist. But he felt like that guy wasn't helping him. He started attending the meetings virtually regularly. He had a sponsor and he was seeing a therapist, and he still didn't feel like it was helping. And I noticed that he started backing away from everything. He seemed like he was in a good place because he was working, he was going to school online, and everything. He was doing everything that everybody would think he should be doing. And I guess the fooling himself, like he kept saying, I should be good. I should be good. He got out after 3 months on the job. He was able to purchase a new car. He had 1 or 2 jobs at all times. He had a wife. He was living in a house. Everything was going good, and he should have been okay. Yeah. And he wasn't. And he wasn't.
In that note that he wrote you, he said that I have been struggling for 2 years.
Right. That's the 2 years we're talking about. He wrote this note after we separated.
Okay. So yeah, he said, I've been struggling for 2 years. He said, I've even fooled myself as though he was good, knowing that and I want to point this out because he was suffering in silence. He was suffering in silence, smiling on the outside and was just struggling on the inside. So audience, I want you guys to understand. I wrote a chapter in my book about that. For years, Kevin was suffering in silence. He was
Miss Bruno.
Yeah,
that is what. So when I did my Facebook Live to first start talking, because like I got adulation among my peers and respect. Stinks, go in there. I'm doing something. So I have adulation and respect among my peers. And so I wanted to start talking about this stuff. Man, so many people reached out to me secretly who by all accounts appeared to be normal and successful, right? But internally they were struggling,
Right,
suffering in
right.
silence, like
And
deteriorating internally.
right, exactly. And this is the thing. And so it just, like I said, guys are always in my DM. You know, ma'am, keep talking about this. Ma'am, keep talking about this. You know, this is true. This is needed. I remember a gentleman just crying. He said, I did 22. He said, I'm messed up and I have messed up my wife's head. And again, like I was saying with Kevin, Kevin was smiling. What you need, babe? What you need, babe? Babe, what you want? What you need? What you need? And then after a while, you know, it's just that emotional flatlined. And then all of a sudden, it just came out. It just came out. So I do want you guys to understand there is such a thing as suffering and silence, and it's called smiling depression. Okay, so that's one point. So now we're gonna flip over before we get to Dr. Tammy, Tosca, because a lot of times, you know, people don't seek help because of their concept of what mental health is.
Hmm.
So their concept is that it means that I'm crazy. It does not. And every time we come on this platform, we're going to be telling you what mental health is. So, Tosca, can you talk to us and tell us what mental health is so that we will free our own self of the myth that it means that we're crazy?
So, mental health is the ability to navigate through life at your optimal level without using maladaptive coping skills or without doing things that cause you more harm unintentionally, even if those mechanisms help you survive day to day. And so there's no simple answer to what mental health is, but everyone knows when they're struggling, right? So if I find myself not sleeping, not eating, smoking too much, drinking too much, thoughts that don't stop, not taking baths, not taking showers, calling into work, right? There's a range of things that could be an indicator that, hey, I need a little bit of support.
Right,
That's all it is that you need a little bit of support to get stronger in the areas where you're struggling.
right. But it does not mean that you're crazy.
No.
It does not mean that you're crazy. Do y'all understand
Mm-mm.
that? It does not mean that you're crazy, right? So I just want to always put that out there so that either you, and like I said before, you know, some of you guys have EAP on your job. You go talk to somebody. You're paying for it anyway, so just take advantage of it. Because I will say this now: when your loved one has come home and they have that learned behavior, it
Hmm.
can take you into a dark, dark, deep, dark place, right? That I mean, I hear it all the time. There's not a day that goes by that there's not somebody in my DM that's basically said, I am losing myself. I am losing myself. So now we're going to talk with Dr. Tammy. And again, I asked Dr. Tammy to be a part because she was a part of the correctional staff for almost 30 years. And I know a lot of times correctional staff get a bad rap, right? But I do want you guys to understand that all correctional staff is not bad people. There are some people who have your loved ones' best interests at heart. But another thing that I want you to share, Dr. Tammy, because you had that conversation. We had that conversation. A lot of times we want to talk about how prison affects our loved ones, the incarcerated ones, but we have to keep in mind that the correctional staff is also seeing all the traumatic things that goes on, right? And so vicariously, that trauma attaches itself to them. And so she and I talked, and she talked about several close friends that she lost at the hands of an inmate. So, Dr. Tammy, you want to share, please?
Thank you, Miss Sheila. I wanted to say to Miss Valinda first, before I address what you were saying, is one thing I wanted to say to you is I want to encourage your heart. I was listening to your story and it touched my heart, because when your husband spoke to you and he said, I need help, I don't even think you understand how much courage that took for him to do. Because inside of the prison walls, I used to call them the walking dead. They were living, function beings, but no life in their eyes. They knew how to perform the routine that they were given, but you didn't see life in their eyes. And for him to be able to tell you that, to be able to voice that to you, it took more courage than you can even understand, because they don't have a voice behind that wall. If you begin to speak, you become weak. Not just weak, you're weak in the eyes of fellow inmates. You can't say but so much behind that wall, you become weak. So I want to commend him for that. And I want to commend you for hearing him, because sometimes when they talk, you don't hear. You hear what you want to hear, but you heard him say, I need help. So I
Yeah.
wanted to say that to you. I was listening to your story and it touched my heart. But as to what you were saying, Miss Sheila, you're absolutely correct in saying that it is a lot of trauma behind those walls. And a lot of times, because you see the bad officers, you don't see that there's honest people in there that's doing an honest job. Some of us care. Some of us have been just as traumatized because you're not in a natural environment. You don't go to work to be cussed out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't go to work to have someone throw feces on you. We didn't go to work and pursue this career. Now, don't get me wrong, some people do. Like I told you the other day, when they put on their uniform, they become Superman or Superwoman. And it is their daily journey to make somebody upset so they can do something that is all the way off the cuff. We see that in the news every day. But for the majority of the people that are there, because as you know for yourself, we don't get paid a whole lot of money to come in there. That's not considered a high paying salary. It's not even recognized by law enforcement, and we're the third branch of law enforcement. I mean, in the criminal justice field, there's the judges, law enforcement, and corrections, and they don't even acknowledge what we do. They don't see us as professionals. So when you have people that go in there, that do a job and do it to the best of their knowledge, I mean, their ability, there's people that leave with trauma. I was one of them. I got up to 300 and some odd pounds because of the things that I saw, and I couldn't articulate it. When I said to you, young lady, about the inmates not having a voice, I didn't have one either, because I would have been considered weak. What happens on MCON stays on MCON. That was the motto. I work nothing but segregation. So I understand about not having a voice, but integrity meant more to me.
Mhm.
I understand what it means standing up for what's right and you having your fellow co-workers against you. I've been there, done that, but I did it anyway. I understand that you go in a block and you don't know if that person is gonna have that person to set you up, and you don't know if you're gonna leave out with your life. I've been there. I've been there.
Mhm.
So I talk from a perspective of wanting to see people healed, because it's never a one-way street. It's two ways in this on this avenue. It goes both ways. But I will say that it needs to be prison reformed, because the people are coming out without resources to help themselves.
Yeah.
You take somebody that's been incarcerated for years, they never had a birth certificate. Never, some of them never talked on a cell phone. They went in as a youth, and now you drop them in an environment that they have no understanding of. They had to carry a quarter or a dime in their pocket to pick up a payphone, and now everybody's walking around on phones. That may seem simple, but that's life changing. That's frightening to somebody that don't know what they're inhabiting. You
Right.
tell somebody to fill out an application and they didn't have a job when they went in there. They were a youth. And you're telling them to fill out an application. They don't know how to do that, but you expect them to survive on the outside. It's not possible. So
Yeah.
yes, there does need to be prison reform. There
Yeah.
does need to be things to teach people how to change their mindset. I met extraordinary people that behind those prison walls, they didn't sit idly with their thumbs twiddling.
Yeah.
They helped themselves by renewing their own minds, by not allowing the environment to become them, but they chose to change the atmosphere and they came out productive. Did they need help? Absolutely. Because you can't be incarcerated in an environment that everything you do is controlled. When you wake up, when you lay down, what you eat, what you wear, where you
Yeah.
can go, when you got to come back. You can't be in that type of environment and then still remain free when you come out. It's an adjustment. And
So,
that's what we're not dealing with.
yeah, and so Dr. Tammy, you made a valid point, and then I want to come to you, Mataka, to see. I want to ask you about solitary or whatever they called it in the prison that you was. But you said something that we also need to understand. Like she said, Dr. Tammy said, they've been in a controlled environment. When to get up, when to go down. I mean, when to take a shower, when to do this, right? And so that takes away their decision making process. So that's why when they come home sometime and you may ask them what they want to eat and they say, I don't know, whatever, because there has been some loved ones who just get frustrated. So every time I ask him to do something, here, I got to make all the decisions. He's been in that controlled environment where he didn't have to make decisions. So Nataka, talk to me about your experience. Did you ever spend any time in the hole? Or
Absolutely.
experience of,
And
yeah.
And you just said something when you said when our decision making abilities have been reduced and we don't really make a lot of decisions. One of the things that we struggle with when we come home is a direct symptom of post incarceration syndrome. It's called um, uh, I forgot what it's called. It's an inability to make decisions due to the suppression of lifestyle choices, though. And we defer a lot. So that's what I used to do when I came home. That menu was so big at that restaurant versus the chow hall options. I used to ask people, I waited till everybody else ordered, and then I was the last one. And I always used to ask the person, what you having? Well, I want that. So it's a chronic sense of helplessness due to the suppression of lifestyle choices.
Right.
Sit back. So I did some time in the hole. One particular stint, I did 6 months, and I realized after being in there for a while, something had happened to me. I woke up one morning with I was overwhelmed. I had a panic attack, right? And so, they have that emergency button in the hole that you press in case a situation arises, an emergency situation, life or death or whatever. But in reality, they don't really respond to it and answer it like they should. And so, that in most cases, right, if something happens, you really could die in a situation like that. And so when those type of thoughts start to overwhelm you, it creates anxiety. And then I had panic attacks. I'll wake up in the middle of the night in this small room with nowhere to go, feeling like, man, if something happens to me, right, I don't have any, well, who gonna save me? I'm literally gonna die in this room by myself because nobody is coming. They need to do better while we talking about prison reform. They need to do better about answering those emergency buttons also, because that's a common thing. Also, they, people, I understand people press them because for the craziest things. However, that does not mean that people who are on duty should be relaxed or laxed in responding to those emergency buttons, because they do a lot. And that not responding and me knowing that created that anxiety and that panic attack. One thing I know is one thing about the whole is it's a form of sensory deprivation. You have spatial and time disorientation when you get out. After you've been in that room and you ain't had access to natural sunlight on a regular, you confined in this space, you don't bathe regularly, you're not getting out regularly, the psychological impact can be great. So when you come out, your distances, your spaces, that stuff becomes a problem. Time orientation becomes a problem. But one of the things that it impacts the most, not from me, but from people I've seen, hey man, people start get adapted to staying in those small spaces, and that destroys their social and life skills. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people are not able to interact with people in a healthy way after they spend long periods in
Right,
solitary confinement.
right, right,
And so even when people are sent to solitary confinement, one thing needs to be done that I would think, based on my personal experience after being in the whole 6 months, a year, man, maybe people need to undergo a psychological evaluation to see what type of supports that they can have as you leave that extreme environment to go
right,
into another environment, right? It's just like when people leave prison and get out, and we talking about post-incarceration syndrome. It's probably an ADSEG incarceration syndrome too for people who leave there and go back into general population.
right. Now, one of the symptoms, because post-incarceration syndrome is a set of mental disorders, and one of them is social sensory deprivation. Okay, social sensory deprivation. You have not been touched by anybody, not only in 6 months. In the case of Valinda, her husband was in there 18 months. Try the guy that has been in there for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years, haven't touched anybody, haven't touched anybody. So that sensory, when like, we're just gonna be transparent here. One lady said to me, he's been out 3 years and he hasn't touched me. He sleeps on the sofa and I sleep on the bed. And I just asked, ma'am, but did you ever know that he had been in solitary confinement? And she said he was for 15 years. Right? Another guy reached out. Y'all, if y'all don't get this, if y'all don't get this, man, look, another guy reached out and he was like in urgency, ma'am. He said, could you please talk to my lady? He said, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything for anybody. He said, and she thinks it's her. He said, I when I touch her or whatever, he said he touch her and then he get back. And I asked him, I said, well, did you do any time in solitary confinement? He said, yes, ma'am, 9 months. 9 months. So I'm telling you, if your loved one comes home, right, and he doesn't want to touch you or whatever, I'm telling you what he's dealing with, this social sensory deprivation. We have to understand. We have to understand, y'all. We got to understand that when our loved ones come home, there's going to be some issues. And this is what I say all the time. Feed it to them now. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be in denial. Feed it to them anyway. Feed it to them anyway. Because some are receptive. Some are receptive. Some have read my book and say, now I understand what's wrong with me. So I want to encourage you guys, if you haven't had an opportunity to read my book, read my book. Send a copy to him. Right? Start the conversation. Start the conversation. Belinda, go ahead.
Say something?
Sure.
You know that I love that, and I'm gonna tell you why. It doesn't just start with segregation, and I'll tell you why. The deprivation starts. I'll give you an example. When people go to visitation, I used to love the word visitation and watch they interact with their families, because it literally starts there. There's such a wall that is built up because their families will come in and they want to love on them because they haven't seen them. But you can see them breaking down on the inside, but being strong on the outside because they know that person has to leave. It's not, segregation amplifies that. It amplifies that attitude of, I'm in this by myself. That's what segregation does, because that's what prison does.
Yeah.
I used to watch how people would interact when they would be around their families. You see it sometimes. I even see it now with some of the people that are incarcerated in jail. They don't want, some of them don't even want their families to see them in that situation because mentally they can't deal with it. So if they separate themselves from it and don't
Yeah.
see themselves in that situation, they can deal with it better.
Yeah. I had one guy to say that, when he went to prison, he said he just started intentionally trying to detach himself from families and all of that. He said because he knew that while he was doing that time, somebody was going to die and he didn't want to feel nothing. So he just started kind of detaching himself from that. Miss Valinda, you and I talked. And when you and I talked, let me mute you. When you and I talked, I got a sense of, that Marcus, right? It's his name, right?
Yeah.
I sensed that he was crying out for help.
Yes.
And he
Yes.
even said that in that letter that he was just doing the drugs, trying to numb the pain.
Yes.
He was doing the drug, trying to numb the pain. But you also shared with me that, and it touched me because in the midst of his struggle, he still wanted to do some things for you.
Yes.
There's no doubt that he did love you, right? And I think that he said he didn't know if he was capable of loving you like you needed to be loved. But
Yes.
one thing that you share with me is that how he would come by and leave you money, but he wouldn't let you see him.
Right.
He,
Toward the end. Yes.
toward the end, he
He
would
would leave
just
the money
share
in.
with us what he did.
He would come by and put the money in the mail slot, and whenever he did get some money that he could help me out or give me anything. But yeah, with the solitary confinement, he said he was there 18 months. And through the course of being there, no one spoke to him. The guards would come and bring the food or leave or take him to shower. They would not utter a word to him. He didn't hear any voices, any human communication. He said if they did bring him a book to read, they would rip out the middle of the book, like just torture, like to just mess with you. And he said that really, really got to him, and it was hard for him. And the what did you say? What was the phrase about the touch?
The social sensory
Yeah.
deprivation.
Yes, that was definitely an issue with him, where he pulled away a lot, and he was trying to figure it out on his own, but he couldn't. He
Right.
couldn't explain it, and he couldn't work past it. And
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand. I'm listening to this. This saddens me because this is the conversation that he was seeking to be a part of. This is what he wanted to hear, what he was looking for when he first got out. But when he didn't find it, he was trying to fix it on his own, and that just didn't work. And it was the thoughts for him. I think he said one of the post incarceration syndrome was just not being able to turn the thoughts off, and that's what he always talked about. Like there's so many thoughts and so many things that's going through his head, and he can't stop. He can't turn it off. He can't stay focused. So
So
that
so so let me ask you that, Tosca. Let me throw it over to you as far as thoughts. What are some things? What are some coping mechanisms that a person can do when they're having all of these thoughts in their heads? And I
Okay.
and I can understand because again, when Kevin and I were going through, and I was just thinking, my thing was so unhealthy that all I would do when I wake up, I just put another sleeping pill in my mouth. And sometimes the thoughts were so strong that the sleeping pills wouldn't even keep me asleep, right? So, what are some things that we can just kind of share with our loved ones? We got to give them something. Just throw it at them, and hopefully, one of whatever it is will stick.
Mhm.
yeah.
So what are some of the things that you do?
So when you're looking at managing your mental health, one of the things, like Miss Vidinia say, is it says is to acknowledge if you have a struggle, right? Because if I don't acknowledge I have a struggle, I don't know where to start at. I always tell my clients I dub myself the resource queen. I know lots of things that could work. However, I have to figure out what's going to work for that individual person. So you can't say this is going to work for this person or this is going to work for that person. What I will say is I encourage people to try lots of different things to see what works best for them. Breathing. One of the things I've recognized is that people are not breathing. We often find people exhaling or taking a deep breath. And I'm like, when's the last time you felt your breath? Being aware of your body, grounding, being in the moment, being able to reach out to a mental health professional. Even if you're not at a point where you want to work with a mental health professional, get information, get knowledge, join mental health platforms, do the research yourself. Do you need counseling? Do you need to exercise? Do you need to change your diet? So the list can go on and on and on. But again, what is a person willing to do? Have they acknowledged that they need support? And then sorting through those things with somebody that is knowledgeable about how mental health works. Because there's not no easy fix, especially after you've had years, like Dr. Tammy said, of every single decision that you've had being made by somebody else. And even as far as when you were saying like coming to visitation, well, not only just seeing that family member in visitation, but the process that your family member has to go through even to come into the visitation room. I can't hug my family too long. You can't hold hands. So all of those things distort the relationships. And so it's going to take a lot of work to get back to a baseline where I can communicate feelings, boundaries, what my needs are, all of those kind of things. So it's like you said, the onion or a big rubber band ball. You can't ever take those big rubber band balls apart, right? It's a long process.
Right. So we're
And
gonna
one just real quick, Dr.
go ahead.
Miss
Go ahead.
Bruno,
Go
some
ahead.
of the stats about solitary confinement. They say suicide increases 4%, homicide can increase by 7%, opioid overdoses increase by 90% within the population. And this is within the population of mental health that already exists within the institution. So they're even more at increased risk. Um, yes, that's all I have for right now.
And you know what? Today I was reading an article, and it was saying that it was a research study was done on solitary confinement and to see, if there was a psychological effect. And so this particular state, I don't even remember what the state was, but they did a search on 247 uh, inmates, and they said only 20% shows some sign that there was some psychological disturbance. However, in the end, they said that this was one of the prisons that had programs. So while they were in that cell, in the hole, they still was able to do some work and had programs that they can work. A lot of the prisons, they don't have that. You in that cell and you're just in that cell.
Well,
My,
also,
go
sorry,
ahead.
also the numbers are underreported because they're not going to say that I have this weakness. So the numbers are skewed. So I would
Right,
always
right,
increase whatever the stats are because I'm not going to tell somebody I'm hurting, I need
right.
help, and I'm suffering. Like those are the words that make you weak within that institution. It's going to make you a target.
Right. And that's what they said also. It was not a diagnosable assessment. I mean, diagnosable, whatever they do. It was just a written assessment that they had to check the box. I was like, well, then they don't check this box and say they having all of these struggles and whatever, they're not going to admit that for whatever reason. As you said, Dr. Tammy, it's that weakness thing. They want to show that they aren't weak. So we're going to start having some questions. Gina, can spouses suffer as well? Yes, ma'am. Where my hand at? You see right here? I be one. I be one that struggled really, really bad. And I hid it. And I hid it because I was suffering in silence because I didn't want nobody to know, right? Until it got that bad. But yes, and the thing is, Gina, you got to take care of yourself. You cannot just sit there because what I'm seeing is that these gentlemen, and I'm sure some females out there too, they are coming home and they are changing your peaceful, they are polluting your peaceful environment. They are bringing that prison mentality and that prison culture into your house. And this is the thing also, there has to be some boundaries in place, and not just boundaries, but you have to be willing to enforce some consequences for the action, because if you do not, then they're going to keep doing the same thing. So yes, there's what's called vicarious trauma. Yeah. And so I'll say to you, you may have to seek help yourself so that you can do as Valinda did. She said by the time he got out, she had been nurturing, she had been to therapy, she had gotten some self-care. So she knew when he got out that she was not going to be tolerating some things that she may have tolerated the first time. So you're gonna have to fix that. Okay. Let's see here. But Taka, what you got to add? I
I
know
was
you
just I was
already.
just thinking about go. Did somebody else? Is somebody else trying to
I know.
talk?
Go ahead.
I was just thinking about some stuff, right? My just things turning in my mind. And we were talking about prison reform because it all goes together, right? Um, we have to too also ask ourselves what type of environment creates this type of trauma, that when people are released, that this type of disruption comes into our homes, our communities, people go back. Like, so we have to start looking at the environment. So if you were a marine biologist, right, and you brought me a sick fish from one area and I dissected the fish and I couldn't determine what was the cause of it, and you keep bringing me fish from this same river, sooner or later I'm gonna have to test the river. Right. We got to test the environment. We got to look at the environment. Every element has to be held accountable. Right. And so this is a real problem. And as far as reform and other things, like when Dr. Tammy was saying about how people disconnect themselves in the visiting room. Well, a lot of the rules in the visiting room are not family friendly, and I understand that they are designed, right, to prevent contraband from entering into the prison, but a lot of the rules are irrational, and they don't promote creating healthy family ties, right? That's the truth of the matter. So I mean, I did 23 and a half years in prison, so I know exactly what the visiting room does and does not do. Some states have different rules. However, it does not promote, right, healthy family interaction. Now, when you have a healthy family interaction, your love is strong with your loved ones. That's a support system that can help you get through that time in a way where your prison stay is directed toward rehabilitation. Families have to be a part of that. Man, can't no COs and no superintendents or none of that tell me that, right? That needs to be come from me, and I need to get the support and encouragement from my loved ones, the people who I'll be back in society with. And so my thing is, as we look at this and we talk about these things, like what type of environment creates the type of trauma that we have to deal with this. So as taxpayers and people who have a vested interest in this, it's important that we look into this too, because some of this stuff is designed to create a distance and keep a distance between family. I don't care what people say. I've been there. Right. You could say one thing, right, but I've seen it in action. So we have to start revisiting and looking at some of the policies and the rules and the SOPs that govern those things that are designed to how family and prisoners interact in these visiting rooms, and the support that they really don't get because people don't want to come. Right, like as Miss Tolson said, man, you come into them. First off, man, family members have to be almost stripped down. They have to go through a process that's akin to dehumanization, right? Just so I can see somebody I love. They come in the visiting room, man, they stripped me down, man. I felt like I got violated. This is your family member telling this to you. You start to feel responsible. Now you like, hey man, well, I really don't want you to go through that, so I don't want you to really come, right? And so now this creates this type of distance, and before you know it, there is that disconnection. And so I understand that the reason for the rules, but sometimes we have to look at this stuff and start to say, okay, if we want to create stronger families, we want to bring families into support, because rehabilitation and reentry is a community thing. Because I say this all the time. If I come home and my mind is not right and society has a bunch of barriers and I continue to try and nobody gives me a break and I put forth my best effort, that frustration starts to set in. And then I revert back to what I know and nobody is safe.
Yeah,
So true rehabilitation also deals with helping the family be
yeah.
involved in the rehabilitative process, and that's part of strengthening the ties.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember I was contacted by this big brand. It's a big brand Christian a program, and I was excited. You know, they was love what you do and necessary whatever, and wanted to talk more about it. And I was like, yeah, well, I have some family members that we could talk about it. And it's like, nah, we don't want to talk to the families. We just want. They basically wanted my information, you know. And I said, you don't want to talk to the families? And so I just stepped away from the table. I said, because I am one of the family. I am a family member and it affected me. So you cannot take the experience of the family out of the process because it affects us all. Miss Valinda had two children. Their dad's incarcerated. And one of the things that he also said in the note, he said, I want to apologize to my grandchildren and my children because I wasn't able to be there for them. I wasn't able to show them what a leader looks like. And Belinda, share with us. So on the 29th, your daughter had something happen on the 29th and something happened on the 30th. And then he was found dead on the 6th of the
Yeah,
month. Yeah,
yeah.
share with us that.
The last interaction was on the 29th. She spoke to him on the phone. I texted him and he sent me a voice message. And on the 30th, the morning of the 30th, she had a car accident. Her car flipped upside down. And just irony, she said she looked away. She don't even know what she looked at, but something caught her attention. And when she turned around, she was headed toward a pole. So she pulled the wheel and the car flipped upside down. She tried to call him. I tried to call him and we didn't get a message. I mean, we didn't get an answer response. So we figured that that's probably the time when he passed between the 29th and the 30th. But the April 6th, someone knocked on my door. The roommates in the building, the rooming house where he was, to let me know that they saw a smell in the building like 2 days ago, and then they realized it was coming from his door. So they kicked the door in, and they found him in there. And the cop told me there was drug paraphernalia found there, drugs and paraphernalia found there. So they believe it was overdose.
Yeah. Trying to numb the voices inside, trying to silence the voices in their head. And this is the thing also, and Tosca, if you can talk to us about this too, because I understand better now. I understand better now. A lot of times, and one of the symptoms of the post incarceration syndrome is the substance use and the substance abuse because they're trying to numb this pain. They're trying to numb the noise in their head, right? And so they take the drugs, right? And it may numb it temporarily, and then there's this thing chasing the high. You're trying to chase that first hit. And so you keep smoking and you keep smoking and you keep smoking. You ain't getting no higher. And that's where the addiction part of it. So Tosca, can you talk to us about the substance abuse? Because there are a lot of family members, he got out and he back on his dope.
Right. So when you're looking at substance use, it's a continuous skill, or it's a skill that's always there, right? So weed is always weed, alcohol is always alcohol, heroin is always heroin. It's an easy, if that's been my coping mechanism, it's easy to go back to that. I have to have something to replace those old behaviors in order to make different decisions. So instead of me going to use, what am I going to do instead? Does that mean I have a recovery partner? Does that mean I go into treatment? And again, what is that person willing to do different? And Miss Marie, I'm so glad that your husband was able to reach out and let you know he was struggling. My sister's been going about a year from substance use. She died from alcoholism at 36, trauma and grief. And so I really feel your pain. And unfortunately, I know that we can't save everybody. Sometimes just being present and in the moment and available so that person knows that they can call for help so that you can help them through that process. Treatment, 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 some kind of support. Nobody can do it by themselves. And so again, Ms. Sheila, there's no easy answer to that because everybody's battle is independent. When did they start start using? Have I ever had different coping skills? Is this the thing that's been my whole family's used, right? Because what do I do if that's been my whole family's coping mechanism? How do I reach out for help when that's my norm? And so every case is individualized. That's why a thorough assessment, just really listening to your clients, what are their needs, what's worked in the past. Because one thing that I found, no matter how long somebody's been incarcerated, is something worked at some point in time.
Okay, great. So let's answer Jessica's question. She said, is he still in? Mine is, and I choke back tears and keep it all inside so he doesn't know what I'm going through. So
Ms. Bruno, I just just one thing real quick. So as we were talking about the substance use, you know, if you've done any studying, anybody who's done any studying on substance use disorder understands that in most cases it's a person's attempt to self-medicate for maybe undiagnosed or unrecognized trauma. So you got a lot of trauma that leads us to prison, right? So we have trauma that we don't have the resources or the skills to address in our community. We self-medicate. That leads to the disorder. That leads to the brain cravings for the drugs, and we got to do what we got to do to get our drugs because we driven. Our brain has been reshaped by cognitive restructuring and neuroplasticity. So with that being the case, right, one of the things that could also be helpful is if we, how do we use this science and take it out of the swell sounding word category and bring it into actual practical application and start working with people, because it's so many mental health professionals that understand that trauma is the driving force. Sanctuary trauma, complex trauma. We do the adverse childhood experiences. So we have a penal system that's geared toward punishment, not addressing the trauma, right? And so when we talk about coping skills should be a temporary thing. The idea is, as you all were saying earlier, with forgiveness. Forgiveness is for you. It's a healing thing. How do we start getting to the healing and not from one system of dependency to another? Right? How do we get to the healing? And so my thing is rehabilitation and correction. The terminology implies that we should have the skills to understand what's truly going on a deeper level, and what we see, the substance use disorder and the criminal behavior that we've engaged in as a result of chasing these things that our brain and these extreme cravings push us towards. We should be looking at it from that level too if we really want to correct and rehabilitate, because we're talking about trauma.
Yeah.
And again, that's a long-term process, because you're unpacking things that have been a way of life. Like, how do you get a new norm when I was born into chaos? It's a long-term process to tear all that apart, to even know that I can use different skills. And on top of why I'm trying to heal, work against all the things that and the people that are still living this way, the people that I love. So how do I heal an environment like we've talked about before, where the hurt occurred?
Right. And another thing that family members need to understand, and it's trauma. You know, I did a piece some years ago, like, how have you considered the trauma? Because I didn't. I did trauma. What? No, I never considered the trauma until I saw it on display, you know, through Kevin. I've never considered the trauma when I'm coming to you, Valinda, when he told me, you know, he had been in prison for 28 years. Okay. That was then, this is not, right? I never considered when he told me that he was molested at 6. I was the first person that he ever told in his 50s. I never considered that. Okay. Well, that was then, that was done. I had no knowledge of trauma. So I had to start studying trauma. And so this is my thing to you, family members. Open up that book or get on this internet and do you some research and do you some study. Because there's the thing, pre-incarceration trauma, child abandonment, rape, bully, all of that. Pre-incarceration, before he even went to prison. Then he go to prison, he may be raped, he may be stabbed, he hear people being raped, hollered, he may be beat. Incarceration trauma. Then he come out post incarceration trauma. You telling him he the head of the house. He got to be responsible for this. He got to be responsible for that. That man don't know nothing about all of that. So here you got all of these traumas, and none of them ever been addressed.
That's complex trauma.
Right? Can I say something? And so guess what? Guess who gonna get the brunt of it all?
The partner.
Can I say something?
The family.
Who's gonna get that? Guess who gonna get that?
Can I
Go
say
ahead. Go
something?
ahead.
We were talking, remember we was talking the other day, and I was telling you how I don't know about other states, but I can tell you about North Carolina, and
Yeah.
how when they shut down all of the mental health institutions because they didn't see a need for mental health institutions to house people that had trauma. And where did they go? They sent them to the prisons. And the prisons were not equipped to deal with people that have mental health issues, nor was society ready to deal with people that had real trauma. So you have those people coming into the prisons that they're full of trauma that they can't talk about, and then it's being induced. Their psychosis is being induced by the environment that they're in, the negative environment that they're in. So you're absolutely correct. There needs to be programs on the outside. Yes, things happen in prison, but some of that stuff came to prison. Some of that psychosis was before they got to prison. Like you said, they were raped and they were molested as children. Their parents were beaten or killed in front of them. They have all of that trauma that caused them to go to other things to deaden that pain. They didn't want to hurt themselves. They wanted the pain to stop. And
Yeah.
it caused them, or it landed them behind bars or incarceration. So then you have them in an environment, a negative environment that does not care. They're there to house them, not to heal them. That's not what prison does. They house them, they don't heal them. So there has to be programs on the outside to deal with trauma. If we're going to look at this 365 degrees and look at it for real, we can't just blame it on the prisons, because some of them that came on the inside had issues before they got there. And they were
Absolutely. I agree with that, Miss
they were,
Tammy.
let me
Yes,
finish.
ma'am. Yes,
They were
ma'am. Go ahead.
magnified once they got there. And on top of that, magnified, you got the anger of being incarcerated. You got the anger of the environment. You got the anger between officer against inmate. You just got a lot behind prison walls. And although I didn't live there, I lived there. The same trauma, the post-traumatic stress, I went through the same thing because I was in the same environment. I was there more than I was with my family. So I know what goes on behind those prison walls. No, I didn't sleep in that single cell, but I experienced the same trauma.
Yeah.
And yes, you do have to be healed. You have to be healed. You have to find an outlet. You have to deal with your psychosis. You have to deal with your mental issues. You have to. In our community, that's taboo. Ain't nothing wrong with you. Get over it. Oh, you just having a moment. You don't go through depression. That's just your way. We made that a stigma in our communities. That's why people are broken and not healed. But now the resources are here, and we're amplifying it in our communities, and that's where it's gonna start, because it's not gonna happen in the prisons.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, Miss Bruno. Let me just one thing. So, but my thing is this. So if we understand all this as an entity that touts itself as a correctional, right, entity, correctional, that means to correct, to make right, right? So as an entity that touts itself as a correctional entity, right, not an entity that is not called, not a warehousing entity, but as a correctional entity. And so in that correction, we understand that exactly what you said. Like, we've done the adverse childhood experiences. We know that trauma leads to the things that leads to prison. So how do we take that knowledge, right, and turn prison into more than just a warehouse? We use the knowledge because we say it's a correctional entity. And so if we saying that a lot of the stuff that people encounter comes from trauma, that means that that's where we have to start at in order to start the process of truly correcting people. So that means that if prison is not doing that, then it's not doing what it touts or labels itself as a correctional entity. It's not correcting then. It's continuing to hold in a stuck pattern, and in some cases corrupt worse, and then put back out on the street and say, here, y'all deal with it. After taxpayers pay their money for a correctional institution, a correctional entity. So it's the job of the prison that touts itself as a correctional entity to get this knowledge, get this science, and start addressing some of these trauma issues that they know are the reasons that drove people to prison before they put them back out into society.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. We can't have this knowledge and say that this is what it is and then not utilize the resources that we have to be able to effectively address it. That is a form of irresponsibility.
But Mataka and everybody else know prisons is big business.
Right. So don't know. So hey, listen. So my thing is, you're right. I tell people all the time, if I worked in big tobacco, why would I want people to stop smoking? But the reality of it is the public has to know, right? So you paying these tax dollars, and your loved one is being locked up for these periods of time, and we look at this as a rehabilitative or corrective entity, but it's really not, though. It's right. It's really not. And so we can get in these panels, we can talk about this trauma, we can do all that, we can break that stuff down. But when we look at the practical application of it in the environments that are designed or labeled to do so, it's not happening.
Yeah. And
there's a negligence being engaged in those environments.
And it starts with our lawmakers. It starts with the policymakers. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. But you know what? There's a buddy system there. If you change this law, guess what? We're not going to have this type of outcome. If you change this law, we might not get as much money as we got last year or whatever. And this is the thing, Mataka, I get it. I wish we could write a policy tomorrow that would change it. But I guarantee you, they would pick it apart in such a manner that it'll never be passed, because the system is not designed to rehabilitate. And this is what I say. I ain't got all the answers. I ain't got all the answers, right? But this is what I say. What is it that we can do as family members? What can we do while they are on the inside to say, hey, this is what's coming. You better prepare yourself now. You might be doing some tripping when you get out here. You know, there's that social sensory deprivation. Feed them that information. Feed it to them. You got to start somewhere. You can't walk out that back gate and then say, you know what, you're going to be tripping when you see all these people walking around you, whatever. Feed it to them now. Feed it to them now, right? I mean, it's one prison in California has taken my book and they are now using it as a study guide. Just to give them a heads up. I ain't got all of the answers. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a therapist. I just have lived experience with it. And so that which I knew, I couldn't keep that to myself. I couldn't keep that to myself. So anyway, guys, we got about 15 more minutes. I want to get to a few questions. We may not be able to get to all of the questions. Now,
Ms. Bruno, just want to say, you said something. Language is really important, so people can be able to name what they feel. So given that language is really important as another starting point.
Right. Exactly. So let me tell you something. We got to educate ourselves, because and we got to educate ourselves in self-care. Educate yourself in self-care. Because, okay, and Jessica is saying, is he still in? Jessica, I think you may be referring to Valinda's husband. Valinda's husband passed around April the 6th of this year. And she's mine is in, and I choke back tears and keep it all inside so he doesn't know what I'm doing with. Let me tell you something. Anything that you bottling up inside, it's going to come out, and it ain't going to be pretty. So my thing is this. You got to get a form of self-care. Self-care. You got to take care of you. A lot of times we want to take care of our loved ones. You got to make sure that your cup is full and your cup is overflowing, and what comes over the top is for him. What stays in the glass is for you. Okay. All right. Let's get to another question here. Okay. I saw somebody said something. Can we elaborate on? But we're going to keep having these conversations, y'all. We're going to keep talking about it, because I'm finding out that the more that we talk about it, the more that system impacted citizens, they want to talk about it. They want somebody to hear them, right? And the more we talk about it, family members are coming forth and say, tell me more. Okay, family members, we're going to tell you more, but what are you going to do with the information? This is why I say when you come to this table, you come to pen and paper, because we're going to be dropping some nuggets. You take that whole same nugget. A lot of times, they say, some people say, we on the phone and we don't do nothing but hold the phone. Okay, here you go. We got you some meeting notes. Just start discussing this stuff over the phone when he calls you. All right. Okay, let's see here. I saw a question here that I really, really wanted to get to. Really, really wanted to get to. Okay. Kim, can you ladies elaborate on this? What do you mean? Do you isolate yourself due to them or not? Kind of understand. I don't understand your question. Anybody understand what Kim is saying here? Do you isolate yourself due to them or don't? Kind of, if Kim, you want to come back and tell us a little more about that. Okay, so guys, again, we're going to do these lives. We do these lives the third Tuesday of every month. And next month, we're going to be doing reentry and intimate relationship with couples who are struggling. And they're open to talk about what the struggles is. And one thing I love about this, and one thing I love about Mataka too, is Mataka was one of the first one. He went, he wrote an article. I'm struggling. And I think that's why I drew to him, because he was one of the first ones to say, yeah, man, I'm struggling. I'm in the movie theater and everybody got on the hood and I'm tripping. I'm tripping because I think something's about to jump out. And then his lady had to say, Mataka, it's cold inside, right? So, these are guys who have admitted that they are struggling. So we're going to give them the platform to talk about it. But I have to say to these family members and these females, you cannot do anything for him. You got to be strong enough. You got to be mentally strong enough, spiritually strong enough, emotionally strong enough to deal with this. And I see so many who are not. And yet you're still trying to hold this man up. You're trying to hold this man up, and all the time you sinking back down. So you're going to have to take care of you while you're helping him. Go ahead, Tasha, please.
I see a Miss Jenna Rogers said that she's afraid to talk to her partner about stress and to let him see his BPD. Nobody can heal if you don't let somebody know how to help you. So, how do you begin to have a healthy relationship if you don't have the core issues or core struggles so that you guys can assist each other in getting better? So, fear is not going to help you get healthy. Go ahead and be willing to be vulnerable so that you guys can be healthy and happy. Sometimes you have to get through the hard and the hurt in order to get to your happy.
Mm-hmm. So Mataka, so maybe you can address this, because this is a lot of women. How do I talk to him about this? How do I talk to him about his behavior? How do you suggest that a woman talks to her partner about what she's seeing, his aggressiveness and all of that? How do you 23 years, how do you suggest that?
So I'm a person who I'm a green on the True Colors personality profile. I love knowledge, right? So when people start introducing stuff, first off, you got to know the person, right? And it's all about strategy, right? And how you present it. I got a saying: people love steak and eggs, but if you give it to them on a trash can lid, they're gonna reject it. You put it on a clean plate, they'll accept it with open arms. Sometimes you have to utilize. There is no one way. Stinks, go in there. There is no one way that I would give a person to say, hey, do it this way or do it that way. That comes with the personal knowledge of the person that you have, right? If they like sports, find somebody who was in sports that struggled with mental health, right? Like I got a partner who loves sports, and it was hard for him to talk about mental health. And I was like, man, you see dudes start talking about that mental health stuff, right? And so you have to find ways to normalize it with people who they look up to, right? Because it is a shame, a stigma attached with saying I got mental health issues. And our job is to continue to have these conversations to normalize it too. So for me, I would say that you have to know that individual, know what that individual likes and dislikes, and then learn about it yourselves, right? We have to learn ourselves so we can find ways to be able to introduce this idea into a conversation. Does a person like to read? What do they like to read? Find ways to introduce the information through books, through articles and stuff like that. So for me, I was one, it was just a simple, from my personal experience, in my mind, I knew something was going on. That suffering in silence thing, right? And I wanted to appear normal because, you know, like I got a lot of respect and adulation among my peers, and I can't be putting myself out there like I'm breaking down and going through some stuff. Right, I can't do that. I got a community that look to me and all this kind of stuff, but inside I'm struggling, right? So you have to make people feel comfortable with talking about it. You may have to, as Miss Tolson said, you have to change the language. You might not say depressed, man. How you feeling today? And a person, you might make them lead the conversation. You feeling sad? Explain that to me. And so when we understand the symptoms of certain things and the conditions that produce them, when we use certain terminologies, we're able to pull out information ourselves without using things that we know lead to shame or stigma, right? So instead of saying hypervigilance, do you exaggerate a start or response? We got to find different words to be able to introduce into the conversation that are in the common vernacular that people can relate to. And you will be surprised how many people say, yeah, man, I feel like that. But we use clinical terms, right? And that run people off. It scares them. Right. I don't want to hear nothing about no PTSD, none of that stuff. I just know I'm paranoid all the time because I feel like somebody out to get me. Right. So that's hypervigilance. When we understand those terms, we have to find the language. As Ms. Tolson said, language is important, knowing the individuals, and then developing strategies based on you knowing that individual. And something else, like it is the responsibility of everybody. Right? Because even if the prison systems don't do it, right, then we have an obligation to do it, because in the end, right, we have to grow up in the communities, right? And a lot of these guys, when they have the right support, man, we've been talking in the context of people coming home being dangerous, and if we don't get a hold of it, then it could be disastrous. But if we can support some of these dudes have the knowledge and the desire to actually impact these communities in a positive way and can start transforming them. So we're not talking about people who coming home, right, that are dangerous to society and we better get a hold of them before they explode. We're talking about people who also, with the right support, can change the trajectory of these communities that we see engulfed in this madness. So we got a lot of leaders in there, right, who's struggling with stuff internally. And if we can help them and they can get them supports, then these guys can come out and be the mentors, be the examples, demonstrate the effectiveness of what transformation looks like in their own lives, to be able to start impacting these communities, working on the preventive end. How do I stop these people from going to prison? Or what can I do? Let me look back and see at troubled times in my life what supports were lacking and what I think would have been able to help me make a different decision that would have led me down a different path. So you got some guys coming home that are not only not volatile but still struggle with this stuff, but are actually great leaders with the right support that can get some of these things done that the people who we put in leadership positions have been incapable of doing.
Getting it done. Yep. That's why I love Mataka. He gonna give it to you straight, unedited, and it's the truth. And so this is the thing that I'm saying now. We are going to form a support group. We are going to form a safe space where these men and women can come home and get in here and we could just talk about them. You know, somebody may be struggling with something that Mataka overcame. So Mataka can say, okay, this is what I did. You know, it's a safe space where they could just come and just talk and get all of that stuff out of their head. Perhaps they wouldn't be like a Valinda husband, you know. So his result, he went to drugs because he didn't have that place to talk. And Valinda, I did look. He was a connection of mine on LinkedIn, but there was never any kind of exchange. He never reached out. He just asked me to connect with him, but I didn't know his story. Had I known his story, I would have reached out to him. Yeah. So anyway, guys,
can I say one thing
absolutely.
about what he said? He is absolutely correct, because of the story. People that's behind the wall, when they come out, they have the ability to impact the community. They can change the young people's lives because they can tell them what it is really like. It's not glamorized. In the young people's eyes, it's glamorized to go to prison. That's a stripe on their shoulder. That's
Yeah.
a pin on their chest. It makes them sick. But if you get the ones that come out, there's a thing going on right now in Baltimore, not too far from where I live at, that is going on right now. This man was formerly incarcerated. I'm going to make it real short, Mr. T. Since the beginning of this year in Baltimore, there 75 days into the year, there was 79 murders. This weekend in Baltimore, there was 5 people shot. One was pregnant, 2 was sitting in the car, 1 was in the restaurant. And this man goes out in the community, him and a team of guys that were formerly incarcerated, and he embraces the young folks. He hugs them. He tells them that they're necessary and they're needed. He tells them what it's about going to prison. It's not a stripe on your shoulder or a pin on your chest. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take the people that was formerly incarcerated, that's not ashamed of where they're being, to help the other ones get to where they need to be.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. And that's what's needed, because some of those youngsters that's out there that's committing the crimes or whatever, they've never been hugged. They never had the fathers there. And it doesn't give them an excuse, but it is reality, because they are suffering with that adverse childhood experience. And it's definitely a pipeline to prison. So we got to keep talking about it. Dr. Tammy, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Would love to have you back again. Valinda, thank you so much. You're welcome anytime. Tosca, you my rider. Mataka, you my rider. Y'all can't go nowhere, right? We're stuck. So again, to the audience, I hope that this information that we shared was helpful to you. I hope that you learned something, you gained some insight, not only for yourself, but you'll be able to have a conversation with your loved one. Just tell them, hey, I was on this Facebook Live listening to this wife after prison, and they said da 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 da, right? And just kind of get them to talking and see what they say about it. But anyway, it's been good. So we will see you guys next month, the 3rd Tuesday of next month. And again, we'll be talking about reentry and relationships. This time we're talking about intimate relationships, where we're going to have the
wives,
the wife,
whatever. Yeah, your partners.
But
The couples.
Mataka, will you be? You gonna be in?
Ask Erica.
Tammy, Valinda, thank you so much. Oscar, Mataka, got much love for you. Couldn't do it without you.
Thank you all. It's great to meet you all. Let's get this stuff together.
So
nice meeting you all.
Yep. And what we're gonna do, you have an opportunity to respond to any of your questions. We'll go back and we'll answer your questions. Okay. All right. I appreciate you guys. Good night.
Peace.
Okay. Debrief.
You're still live.